Hello, I'm Javan Lockhart with Healing Hearts of Indy. I'm a therapist who sees marriage, family, individuals for relationship issues, any type of counseling that might be needed for anxiety, depression, addictions, anger management. And this week's video is about grief, loss, and betrayal. Grief can be experienced in so many different ways in a person's life. You can be going through grief for some of the more obvious reasons based on loss of a loved one, loss of a marriage, loss of a child, maybe loss of life as you might have known it to how it was going to be. There are many different ways to experience grief in your life. Some of the ways people also might experience grief is through the betrayal of a friend, a coworker, a marriage partner, through an affair. You may lose someone to addiction. And grief, betrayal, and pain are experienced very differently among people, even though there may be some commonalities among all of us. How we process grief and loss and betrayal is unique because each person is uniquely wired. And what that means to you and how you respond is also very unique to who you are, which is why it might be helpful to speak to a therapist or a counselor about your grief. If you feel that grief is not moving along and you feel stuck somewhere in a very hard place, for example, if you're having signs of depression, tearfulness, sadness for more than 6 months or so, it might be time to see a counselor. Also, grief is very normal when you've lost a loved one who's close to you, to sudden death, accident, suicide, any of those things. It's very normal to have grief. But it really is up to you how you feel about your betrayal or grief experience and how you would like to move through that. Some very normal parts of grief are denial, anger, bargaining, depression, and acceptance. And it doesn't have to come in that order. We can kind of loop around and go back and forth between anger and bargaining and denial, and there are even some more finer-tuned experiences that go on within those stages of loss and betrayal. Feeling hurt by someone that has betrayed you can be a different type of grief and anger and betrayal process versus someone who you've lost to death. But in either case, it can feel quite hopeless and helpless. You may feel, for example, that there really isn't a whole lot that you can do to change the situation or to stop the event from happening if there's an impending loss coming around the corner for you in your life. So it's really important to, one, understand that it's very normal to go through these very frustrating and challenging times when you've been betrayed, when you have felt loss. It could even be the loss of childhood that you didn't recognize much early in life, but you are recognizing it now as an adult. A lot of the anger and depression and sadness of the loss of childhood can occur in adulthood by another triggering event that brings out grief, and then along with it, some of that older, young childhood emotional baggage can remain in the background and can possibly elongate the grieving process, which is another reason why it might be good to seek a therapist or a counselor to help you move towards some type of resolution or acceptance or some way around what you're feeling to understand how you can come to peace and come to terms with what's gone on. Making sure that you can heal your grieving heart is very important in your life. When these issues are not resolved, grief and anger can have a way of multiplying on top of itself and adding on to your life and becomes something that's hard to understand. And how you're processing that anger ends up coming out in indirect ways that could be unhealthy or could cost you other relationships or can further your depression and sadness into a very helpless place. That's another reason why counseling can be very, very helpful to you if you're needing to process some of that pain and understand that going through grief is a very normal part of human life. There are many things that we do not control, things that people do, disease, accidents. A lot of bad things happen to good people, and you want to make sure that you're keeping all these things in check. If you don't have a counselor to speak with, perhaps you can go to a friend, a trusted religious person at your church or synagogue or temple or whatever your faith may be. Maybe somebody at work who you know can care about what you're going through. It's really important to share some of this grief process because it can feel burdensome. And one of the items to look for is isolation, which goes along with depression. What you're going through matters and is very important. And if you'd like to set up an appointment or think you might need a counselor, please feel free to contact me to make an appointment at 317-224-3211. You can also reach me at my email, that's Javan, Javan, at healingheartsofindy.com. We're right off Keystone and 96th Street in front of the BMW dealership. And again, you can follow my blog at healingheartsofindy.com and Javan's blog. Thank you for listening this week.